the NFL offseason has hit high gear, and so we now have some rule changes, and also the salary cap for next year, for the 2022 season. Let's first go with the salary cap, as the NFL and the NFLPA have agreed for the 2022 salary cap will be $208.2 million. That's about $30 million more than this year. I believe if we look at last year's, it was 178.2 or 178.8, something like that. And the ceiling, that was the floor for the salary cap, and the ceiling for the salary cap was 180. So not a lot of wiggle room. But the reason why the salary cap is going up is because the new TV deals are going to come in. That's when the NFL and the NFLPA went and talked to CBS, Fox, NBC, ABC, ESPN, NFL Network, all these places, Amazon Prime, and as well as Facebook Live. When they talked about this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, and here's a 7 to 10 year contract, and we're going to be able to get out of 7 years if we want. I don't know if they're going to get out if it's $208 million they're going to get this year. I mean next year, and then the following years, who knows, will be maybe around 280. Again, like where it was a few years ago, it was just too much to bear, and now it won't be. It's going to give teams a lot more flexibility. And the NFL owners have approved a 90-man roster for camp. Now, normally how these things work is OTAs, you got 90 people, you got 90 men that you can use. But when you get to camp, you can't use 90 people. You can start with 90, but you have to cut down to 75 through the whole preseason period. Then you cut from 75 to 53. So it's about, you lose about 12 to 15 people per shot due to cut days. That's not how it's going to work. You're going to come into camp with 90 men. Then in August, so around preseason time, you're going to cut to 85 on August 17, 80 on August 24, and then drop from 80 to 53 on August 31st. Now understand, on August 31st will be 10 days till the new regular season, which starts with the Cowboys visiting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So that's a big move to do that. And then the way these practice squads are working this year was there were, I believe, 18 spots last year. Now there's going to be only 12. But if you have a player from the international program, they don't count, but you can have them on your practice squad, but they don't count. My personal thing, and this would be my preference, would be make the rosters, put them up to 60. Then put the practice squad to an even number of 16 and count the international player with it. That way you're carrying 76 guys. Because roughly you have about 7 to 10 injuries per year, roughly on average usually, but sometimes more, sometimes less. The Cardinals in 2015, I believe, had 21 guys on IR. That was how strange their season was, and they still made the playoffs. So you roughly lose 7 to 10 guys, and that's where these guys would be available. To carry 16 would be very interesting. It would also give people more chances to make the roster. But the one rule I did like what the NFL did implement last year was they say, okay, you can elevate 2 guys from the practice squad for every game. But that player has 3 times that he can get elevated until you go and have to make a decision. Do I put him on the active roster and then have to cut a guy and hope he gets through the waivers and then put him on the practice squad? Or do I risk losing him to another team? That could also happen. So I do like that dynamic, because there's some places you get injured, and you need to move guys up constantly, but you don't want to put them on the active roster. So it adds a little more intrigue to that kind of part of the game. Moving on to regular news, Donovan Wilson, the safety for the Dallas Cowboys, is changing his number from number 37 to number 6. He wore number 6 in college, and if he's going to be a starter, I don't see the problem with this. He wore it in college, and he doesn't have to do what Jalen Smith did and buy out all the inventory for number 37. He can just take number 6, and he doesn't have to ask anybody to take number 6, because no one in the history of the Cowboys has worn number 6. So he'll get to wear number 6, which is great, I think. It adds a little new dynamic. It'll be a little weird to start, but teams are going to like it. Adam Vinatieri, longtime kicker for the Colts and for the Patriots, 4-time Super Bowl champion with the Colts and Patriots, has announced his retirement after 24 years in the NFL at age 48. He is the all-time leader for points scored by a kicker. The all-time scoring leader for points scored as a kicker. He passed Morton Anderson over a few years ago. And honestly, when he said this on the Pat McAfee show, which if you can remember, Vinatieri and McAfee were both teammates when Vinatieri was at the Indianapolis Colts, and they are still friends to this day. But what happened is Vinatieri was talking about how he was thinking, I might be able to come back. He was on, I believe, Chris Mortensen's podcast, and he would say, yeah, I'm trying to get for a comeback and stuff, but his body wasn't reacting the way he expected. And then on the Pat McAfee show, he announced his retirement live. And you should watch it. It's on the Pat McAfee show YouTube channel. It's very emotional if you've been a fan of Adam Vinatieri through the whole course of his career. This guy will be in the Hall of Fame. He's the best kicker and the greatest kicker of all time, I think. This guy has been so clutch in his career. He's won Super Bowls. He's won kicking titles. He's been the best kicker in the league. He's probably been the most clutchest kicker in the league history. He's been amazing and unbelievable. And Pat McAfee tells a great story of how he was, as the holder for Vinatieri, he said that the punter, when the punter was a holder, was like a caddy for a golfer, and how they just try and keep it light and stuff. And when they were about to go kick, he would be like, "You ready, old man?" And Vinatieri would either nod to him or say, "Yep," and then they go. And it was just consistency over and over again. But he's like, when we had to make that clutch kick in Detroit to that game-winning field goal, I go and I'm ready to go, and I say, "Are you ready?" He's like, I said, "Are you ready, old man?" He didn't say anything. He's like, and then I go and I ask him again, "Are you ready?" He's not saying anything, and he's like, I looked back, and here's this guy who's he's in a different place. And he's like, he was so clutch that he was able to go into a place, and he basically looked soulless, because he was in a different place. And he's like, and Pat was like, I guess we go now. I guess we go. And that's what they did. And so they model of consistency. They were basically the NFL battery. You know how a catcher and a pitcher are considered a battery or a battery? That's basically what a punter or a holder and a kicker are. Basically a battery. That's what they are. And so I think obviously Pat knows it, but Vinatieri I think is the greatest kicker of all time. And he will be in the Hall of Fame. It took Morton Anderson like 15 years to get in the Hall of Fame. It won't take Vinatieri that long. I think Vinatieri becomes a first ballot Hall of Famer because he's also like one of the first Italian players to really be in the NFL. The man got in the NFL when he was like, I believe 23, 24, and he's 48, and he decides to hang it up. So congratulations, Vinatieri, on a great career, and hopefully, like, because Vinatieri is a hilarious person to be around. And you can just see the excitement he has. Hopefully, he does something with the networks and talks about field goals and kicking and all that kind of stuff. Because I think he'd be great at it. But congratulations on a great career, and we hope that you have as much success in your next venture of life as you did in this one. The Cowboys made an interesting hire. They hired former head coach of the New York Giants, Ben McAdoo, as a consultant. They hired Ben McAdoo because Mike McCarthy knows him. Both Pennsylvania guys. Ben McAdoo grew up in Homersville City, Pennsylvania, and Mike McCarthy grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so about an hour away from each other. When Ben McAdoo got brought into the NFL, it was McCarthy who was the offensive coordinator in 2005 with the New Orleans Saints. He brought McAdoo in as a position coach. In 2006, he brought McAdoo to San Francisco, where he was also the offensive coordinator at that time, and brought him in as a position coach. And when McCarthy got the job in Green Bay, he brought McAdoo in as a position coach in Green Bay as well. So they have a long history. Now, what is Ben McAdoo going to do? I don't know. Maybe he'll be like the water boy, where he'll just bring water to everybody in the office. Maybe he'll go, like, bring cars to shops if they need fixing. I don't know. Maybe he'll just be a yes man. I have no idea what he's going to do. But it's going to be very interesting to see what happens and how he's going to be used. Because he will be a consultant to Mike McCarthy. He's not a consultant for Jerry Jones or the Cowboys. He's a consultant for Mike McCarthy. Both starting tackles for the Dallas Cowboys, Tyron Smith and Lyle Collins, are full goes for camp, which is great news because everyone, including ESPN, has said this Cowboys offensive line is old. Well, let's look. Tyron Smith is probably the oldest guy. He's 30. He's on the old side of 30. He's gotten hurt, and he had the neck issue. But he got that fixed, and the neck has been bothering him for the last few years, but he's played through it. He's always played through injuries. Lyle Collins is, I believe, 27. Zach Martin is 28, 29. And Connor Williams is, I believe, 25, 26. And Tyler Biadasz, the center, is 24. They're not that old. But ESPN wants to say they're old. And then on the flip side, they say how bad this defense was last year and how they didn't bring anyone in. They brought in 6 guys from free agency to draft. They draft Chauncey Golston, Osa Odigizua, and they draft Quentin Bohanna. And then they go and bring in guys from free agency. It's not that shocking, but it's like, if you're going to say something, at least make it right. At least say it correctly. Like, they did do something. They drafted guys. They brought in guys from free agency. Now, they're not big name guys. I understand. They're not Geno Atkins. They're not Warren Sapp. They're not, any of these guys. But they are guys. They are trying to help. And they brought in 2 new linebackers and Micah Parsons and Jabril Cox. It will work. It will work. It will be better than what it was. But then you have people like Dan Orlovsky and Greg McElroy. It's like, I understand you quarterbacks. I get it. You're a quarterback, you know probably a lot more than I will ever know. But, come on, ESPN. Like, are we really being serious? Like, you could have gotten Peyton Manning. You could have gotten any of these guys. And you chose to go get backups to go talk like this. Now, he may be really smart. They may be very smart guys. But I'm just saying, it doesn't make any sense to bring them in and say things that they don't even know much about. Like, Dan Orlovsky has said, and Mike Fisher, who works for SI.com, and I watch him, and he's very interesting, and you should too. He talks about how when he heard that Dan Orlovsky doesn't like Dak, he's like, well, if he would have said Jerry Jones, it would have been like, okay, get in the back of the line. Because a lot of people don't like Jerry Jones, but you have to respect him for what he's done for the Cowboys and the NFL and bringing in so much money. But then you look on the other side and you're like, but when you go and say Dak Prescott, I don't like Dak Prescott, now you're talking at this point. Now people are going to try and listen to you and do this and do that and do this and do that. And now every time that he talks about the Dallas Cowboys, he said that everyone giggles because it's ridiculous. They're like laughing because they know there's a joke at this. They're poking fun at it because they don't want to be serious. And that's the problem. You go, like he was talking, Dan Orlovsky was saying that how the Cowboys are not as good as Washington. I agree. We're not as good as the Washington defense is, I don't think. Because we're not proven. I understand that. No, nothing wrong with that. I totally respect that. But to say we're not as good as the Giants and Daniel Jones is better than Dak Prescott? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Daniel Jones is a turnover machine. Daniel Jones turns the ball over more than you break a pencil. This guy turns the ball over. That's how ridiculous he is. It's to say he's better than the Cowboys, and to say Joe Judge is a better coach than Mike McCarthy is, and they had the same record, and also Dak Prescott was not with the Cowboys, and they were injured everywhere. Where the Giants, yes, they lost Saquon Barkley, and yes, that's a whole part of their offense, but they struggled to get to 6-10. But the Cowboys were limping along and still found a way to get to 6-10 without Dak Prescott. And with a terrible offensive line and everything, and the defense was terrible. It doesn't make sense. Why? And one more thing. Why is Adam Schefter debating? Why is he debating? It makes no sense. He's an insider. You don't see Ian Rappaport debate for NFL Network. You don't see Jay Glazer debate for NFL on Fox. So why, or for Fox Network, why is Adam Schefter debating? Is it because you ran out of bodies? Like, what is going on? He's an insider. He's not a debate guy. So why are we watching him debate? It makes no sense. But I've gone through my rant, and I blew off some steam, because that was ridiculous. The Falcons are upset at Julio Jones' impromptu interview. That's because they thought, hey, we could have gotten more. We can't get more now. And they're mad at Julio for doing that, and Julio didn't even know, possibly, according to a report, he didn't even know if he was on television or not, and they only told him until after. So, there's a whole lot of situations going on at this point. Dak Prescott has said that, again, as reporters keep asking how's the leg, he said no issues in OTAs, no issues, I'm ready, I'm pretty much 100%. The Giants signed their third-round pick, cornerback Aaron Robinson, out of Central Florida to his rookie contract. And finally, a new rule. Well, not a new rule, a rule enforcement. Offensive and defensive players on the line on scrimmage downs when contact occurs beyond 5 yards or either side of scrimmage, and more than 2 yards outside of the tackle of the offensive tackles will have a penalty for these low blocks. That includes tight ends. This is to help with player safety, and it's because a lot of teams, like especially like the Ravens, the Rams, where they use the running game and they use their tight ends to come across the field and try and chop people at their legs. That's to stop that. But what do you guys think? Where should Julio Jones go? And what do you think about players changing their numbers to lower digit numbers, to one digit numbers? You decide.